Anime is fucking weird. There's no denying that. One of the most popular shows this season is Darling in the Franxx, a show where kids have mind sex to power giant robots and fight off monsters that look like the Blue Man Group just fucked a bunch of random assorted objects around the house. Shows like this are awesome, not just because it's a new creative idea, but also because it continues to show how impressive the medium can be as a whole. Anime as a visual medium can offer so much that you can't get from, say, a live-action movie. Like, the giant robots in Pacific Rim are cool, but they just aren't the same as the Franxx, or Gurren Lagann, or any of the hundreds of fucking Gundam robots. With all that being said, one genre of anime that gets criticized for its lack of realism is the sports genre. Mainly one show in particular, Kuroko no Basket. Kuroko no Basket centers around the recently formed high school team Seirin, and their new first-year players Kuroko Tetsuya and Kagami Taiga. Kuroko comes from a middle school that held the Generation of Miracles, 5 players that are so unnaturally good that they became ridiculed and known as monsters for their overwhelming talent. Kuroko is known as the phantom sixth man of the group. People weren't even sure if he existed because A, the rest of the Generation of Miracles took any attention away from him, and B, he uses a technique called misdirection to almost disappear on the court so he can deliver passes to his teammates. Kuroko wants to help Kagami become the best player in Japan and take down the rest of the Generation of Miracles, who have all gone their separate ways since middle school. It's in their matches that we see some of the craziest shit to ever happen on a basketball court. For those who don't know, the players in Kuroko no Basket have abilities such as turning invisible, making shots from anywhere on the court, making other people invisible, seeing the future, copying any move perfectly after you've seen it once, and possibly my favorite, making the ball pass through people's hands. Isn't that awesome? Now, most of this kind of makes sense in the context of the story. Most of the moves are performed through sleight of hand tricks or techniques that require so much precision that nobody except a basketball genius could pull it off. It's only in light of learning how their tricks are done that make them seemingly plausible. Except that hand thing, that shit's fucked. Kuroko no Basket isn't the only show to have over-the-top, almost impossible feats. Eyeshield 21 and The Prince of Tennis are 2 examples of shows that take their respective sports, ramp it up to 11, and give their characters almost inhuman abilities. The only difference with those shows are nobody's fucking seen them. Both Eyeshield 21 and Prince of Tennis are old and probably better known for their manga, as their anime adaptations are both underwhelming and not that impressive. Kuroko no Basket is the only show popular enough to warrant the criticism. It's compared to more grounded shows like Baby Steps, Haikyuu, and Free. Much more popular shows that are fairly realistic. There's nothing wrong with those shows in the way they handle themselves. It's only in the way they're compared to Kuroko no Basket that rubs me the wrong way. Kuroko no Basket goes out of its way to show you things that you can only imagine on a basketball court, while those other shows don't push your suspension of disbelief. I can appreciate the best animated scenes in those shows, except for Baby Steps, that looks like shit. But I can also see them being told in other mediums. Haikyuu could totally have a live-action movie that could be at least halfway decent just because it doesn't have to be heavily edited. Kuroko no Basket, on the other hand, only benefits from being animated. The closest possible example to a live-action movie like that is Space Jam. And not only do the modified live-action parts look like shit, but it never shows off the speed and fluidity of the game that would be required to make a live-action Kuroko no Basket work. I am aware that both Haikyuu and Kuroko no Basket have stage plays over in Japan, but they both suck and should be thrown in a dumpster fire with the rest of the anime stage plays. Aside from the crazy tricks that some of the players do, Kuroko no Basket has a very hyperbolic approach to the way it views basketball. It understands and excels at conveying 2 things: narcissism and narrative. The Generation of Miracles are often criticized because they're too arrogant. It's hard for people to buy into them wanting to win, but not taking the necessary steps to do so. They won't rely on their teammates or pass to them. Aomine has gone so far as to stop practicing with the team altogether because he sees it as a waste of time. It's because of their attitudes that people can't take them seriously as characters. Let's address why those complaints don't make any sense. The Generation of Miracles are a group of players who were ostracized by their peers because they are so talented. It doesn't seem like they have lives or friends outside of basketball, except for Kisei, who worked as a model and is charismatic enough to have people like him despite his overwhelming talent. In the beginning, it doesn't even seem like their respective teams are too fond of them. Outside of one or two members, nobody is willing to put up with their shit. They all have an understanding that they need them to win, but at the same time won't go out of their way to be friendly with them. Akashi's teammates seem to interact with him out of fear rather than friendship. The way people interact with the Generation of Miracles feeds into their arrogance and mindset. It leads them to believe that they can take on any team alone, and it's only when a team that works together defeats them that they start to realize how basketball should be played, as a team. You know, it's funny. I'm not necessarily surprised that their mindsets developed like that. Not just because of how they were treated, but also because of the nature of basketball as a sport. Basketball isn't a humble sport. It's always been about individual achievements, showing off, and embarrassing your opponents. Look at some of the greatest names in the game. Larry Bird, Kobe Bryant, Shaquille O'Neal. You think those guys are humble? Allen Iverson took a team full of scrubs to the finals back in 2001. He single-handedly won their first game, and one of his greatest moments happened where he stepped over Tyronn Lue after scoring on him. We loved him for that. Michael Jordan punched teammates that couldn't live up to his standards. We consider him the greatest of all time. Professionals in any sport have egos, but in basketball, they're what make the game great. Look at how the stadiums are even set up. The crowd is dark. The court is lit. It's a stage, one that only the best players can stand on. The way the game is played drives home this point even further. Basketball is confrontational. Players are in each other's faces all the time, shoving, pushing, and knocking each other down. If one player is barreling through the opposition and dunking on them through sheer power, isn't that something to be proud of? Knowing that you can dominate the opposition? Basketball is the only team sport where one single player can absolutely dominate on both offense and defense alone. Having antagonists based solely off that idea is what makes the Generation of Miracles different from antagonists in other shows. To be honest, for as hyped up as Shira Torizawa was, they're kinda lackluster antagonists for their one match to take up the entire third season of Haikyuu. None of the characters, except for Tendo, were even remotely interesting, and the only reason Tendo was is because of the way he interacted with Karasuno. He takes pleasure in seeing the despair and hopelessness he instills into his opponents. He's a welcome turn from the milquetoast opponents we usually see Karasuno face. Aoba Josai, on the other hand, is without a doubt the most interesting antagonist in the story. They completely outclass Shira Torizawa in terms of impact on the story, and that's because of one thing: narrative. You might be thinking to yourself right now, Tomziac, you devilishly handsome bastard you! Are you telling me that the story is the reason that the story is good? Well, if you stop thinking while the master of all sports ball is talking, you might learn something. Maybe you'll even learn something from my unfathomably sick skills. Beautiful. If you follow sports, then you should know that sometimes what's more interesting than watching the sport itself is the narrative that goes behind it. If you don't follow sports, well, that's why I'm fucking explaining it now, isn't it? Your favorite team is playing their long-standing rivals. Old teammates are squaring off against each other. A team wants revenge for a crushing defeat. Championships, status, legacies are on the line. Those type of factors can make any game so much more interesting to watch. The intensity the players exude from trying their hardest in such meaningful matches can be something really special. Like I said before, Aoba Josai are good antagonists because of this, but Kuroko Basket has it in fucking spades. The Generation of Miracles have a long history together. Explaining every little minute detail about them would take for fucking ever, but I want to go over one match specifically that explores why history between opposing teams and characters is so important. It's the match between Kisei, the copycat superstar, versus Aomine, the ace of the Generation of Miracles. At the end of the first season, Kisei and Aomine face off in a match that serves two purposes: to set up character growth for Kisei, and to emphasize Aomine's ideology for the way he plays basketball. Kisei started to play basketball because he was inspired by how much fun Aomine looked like he was having. Up until that point, Kisei was so bored with everything he tried because he was an instant prodigy at it. Aomine gave him a challenge that he never had before and couldn't overcome: copying and defeating him. In their match, Kisei lets go of his adoration of Aomine, which was holding him back from copying him, and is able to match him blow for blow in any move that's thrown out. It comes down to the final moments of the match, but instead of playing selfishly like Aomine, Kisei decides to trust his teammates. Aomine has already established that he sees that as a weakness from when he beat Kuroko and Kagami earlier in the season, and when he sees Kisei trying to do the same thing, he takes advantage of that weakness and beats him, confirming even further in his mind that the way he plays basketball is the right and only way to do it. Kisei overcomes his roadblock of worshipping Aomine, which allows him to copy him, and eventually the other members of the Generation of Miracles. But at the same time, he comes to question whether or not team-oriented basketball is really the way to go. This match wouldn't work if Kisei and Aomine had no history with each other. Sure, it's fun to watch two teams that the main characters have played duke it out, but there's a substantial difference with this. It allows Kisei and Aomine to have their history with each other expanded upon without the main characters being involved. It gives us an entire match, which is about 3 episodes, to be carried by what are considered side characters. But the emotional impact that is thrust into the match makes it far better than some of the matches the main characters face. Now, I will admit that some of the history added to characters and their backstories create minor plot holes. It's nothing story-breaking, but they are there. You sacrifice some continuity to introduce these new elements that might not make a lot of sense, but it's worth it if it serves to make the matches that more intense and meaningful. As I said before, I like realistic, grounded sports anime. Hell, Free is the only show that I've seen that puts a focus on what high schoolers do when they don't know if they want to continue the sport after high school. That's a refreshing take on the whole third-year players are leaving trope. It's just sad to see when someone pulls the unrealistic card against Kuroko no Basket when comparing it to other shows. Like, it delegitimizes the series when it obviously knows what it's doing. Like, fuck man, Keijo is just the butt battle from Dead or Alive Extreme times anime, and nobody bats a fucking eye about how realistic that is. We pick and choose what we're willing to put up with, but don't for 1 second think that it makes those shows any less great. Well, that's all I got for now. Hope I can make you think about stuff and keep you entertained. If you liked the video, subscribe to keep up to date with all the new shit I put out. Share the video, and go follow me on Twitter if you want to hear about all the neat stuff I do. Spoilers, it's fucking nothing. Anyway, I'll see you guys in the next one. Love and peace, everyone.